Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome. It's episode number 92 of the Resilient Retail Game Plan. I'm your host, Catherine Erdley, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is my membership group for product businesses. You can find out more at resilientretailclub.com. And if you use the code 10podcast, that's 10 podcast, you can get £10 off your first month. So today's guest is Aime Cox-Tennant, who is the founder of Studio Cotton. Studio Cotton is a web design agency based in Bristol. And what I love about Aime, and the reason I've followed her for a long time on Instagram, is that she shares lots of really genuinely useful, practical information about websites, specifically as they relate to small businesses. She's got an absolute wealth of knowledge of what it takes to make a decent, effective small business website. So we talk about all different things here, from the way that websites have changed since she started her business 6 years ago, to what people may not even know they don't know about having a website. So take a listen, and I hope you enjoy Aime's insights into what can make your website even better. Thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to start off by introducing yourself?
So I'm Aime Cox-Tennant, founder of Studio Cotton, and we've just celebrated our 6th birthday. And we are a web design studio, and we work exclusively with lovely small businesses. So things like jewelers, florists, a lot of lovely online shops. And as well as creating websites, we offer a little bit of one-to-one consulting, as well as the odd workshop on website design topics like UX, SEO, and accessibility as well.
Fantastic. And you're very passionate about this, I know, from having spoken to you before.
Pretty darn righteous, yeah.
So let's just jump straight in then and talking about the kind of role that websites play for small businesses. You said you've been going for 6 years.
Yeah.
How do you think it's changed, even in the last 6 years, the role of the website for a small business?
I think there's been two major things that have kind of changed the landscape in small business websites. The first one is just the availability of a lot of DIY website building platforms. Both Squarespace and I think Shopify are both older than 6 years, but they've just become kind of not necessarily more affordable as in a lower price point, but kind of a more easily justified investment for a lot of small businesses. And then also a lot of web designers have adopted these platforms as well, which gives clients the option to have these kind of easy to manage content management systems matched with a bit of a prettier exterior. And the other huge factor, which is probably unsurprising, was the coronavirus pandemic. Because there's sheer explosion of small businesses, especially in the first year, in the first lockdown, there was even businesses that we'd worked with kind of in tangent for months or years before the pandemic started, who had not been in a hurry to necessarily, some of them might have already had their own website, but just one where they'd like popped up a holding page or popped up a page that redirected to an Etsy shop. Whereas now they're taking it a lot more seriously and had to build out a much more kind of thorough online e-commerce platform rather than just popping something up and hoping for the best as like a placeholder. So yeah, it's been really interesting. And I think the other, now I'm going off on a tangent already.
No, tangents are welcome. Love it.
Yeah, the other thing that's really changed is I think a lot of the business we work with, so we do work with a lot of arts and crafts and hobby-based businesses who saw an explosion in customers during the first couple of lockdowns as well. Unsurprisingly, people had a lot of time sat at home to knit and crochet, who have now seen that kind of online shopping explosion has petered off a little, which means that now a lot of the marketing activity that supports your website that may have worked in 2020 doesn't have the power that it did now in 2022. So things like quick win marketing tactics like email marketing and a lot of social media activity in 2020, that might have been enough to cause a little boost in sales, but in 2022, it's looking very different. So instead, it's a lot of investing in a lot of the more boring sides of website marketing and maintenance. So people are hopefully now investing a lot more in SEO, which is one of my favorite web design topics, and also in things like blogging as well, which is such a great tool for a small business and is so neglected, which makes my heart sad.
Ah, I love it. So blogging, yeah, because that's one of those topics that every so often I talk about blogging and people say to me, is blogging still a thing? Like, do people still read blogs?
Yes, yeah. It is crazy because I think a lot of people don't realize quite how many blogs they are reading. So anytime you ever Google something, like for me, preparing for my week off of work, and I like beach combing as a hobby. So one thing I was looking up was like the best sea glass beaches in the UK, and every result that I found is like top 5, top 6. Those are all blogs, and they're the things that get overlooked by, I think, a lot of small business owners who think no one reads blogs, but it's because they don't necessarily count these articles that they encounter every other day as blog posts.
Oh my goodness, that's so true. Yeah, I was just Googling something random myself the other day, probably something like, so we're getting the big news for us this year is we're getting a puppy at some point. We're on a waiting list for a puppy. So of course I've been like, and probably not going to get this puppy till about September, and we're now in April, but I'm still already Googling. So I think I was Googling something the other day, and it was something like, I noticed lots of dogs were wearing harnesses and not collars, and I haven't had a dog for like 25 years. So I was like, is this a thing now that people? So I was Googling harnesses or collars. But you're right, that was probably all blog posts. That's such an interesting point.
And the thing is, again, this, because I know loads of independent pet brands, and if an independent dog lead and dog harness company hasn't written it and a big company has, the big company is going to get the traffic. And blogging is great. It's also a lot less competitive than like looking at SEO, search engine optimization. Product page and product description optimization is way more competitive than blog writing because there's just fewer blog posts out there and you can be way more targeted, way more wordy. And it's such a great way to show off your personality as well, because people expect blogs to be written by humans and to be silly and contain anecdotes and contain your totally subjective opinions on beachcombing and the best sea glass beaches.
Where is the best sea glass beach, incidentally? Did you find out?
I'm still finding out. So there's a beach near Sunderland called Seaham, which is like the viral one online. But if you're in the West Country, Clevedon, just outside of Bristol, is a phenomenal sea glass beach, and it never gets a shout out. So yeah,
maybe you should. Could you submit a guest post? No. Okay, so I kind of bring it back then to how it's changed. And so it's more important than ever to have a website. So it's almost like a non-negotiable now, would you say? If you've got a small business, you need a website. I would say, like, if you're kind of like having your first foray into small business, there are things like online marketplaces like Etsy for physical products, or something like Creative Market for digital products. And they are really good options for testing the waters because there's no commitment and pretty minimal setup costs. But as soon as you're kind of turning it from I'm trying it out into a business, I would get yourself a website, especially having a domain. So having like something.co.uk as soon as you can, because like that's going to be your like the core of your business going forward. And the sooner you have that core, the sooner you can start doing things like building your SEO, building your press, and having links back to your website. So yeah, get on it. So not only is it more important than ever, but as you said, it is becoming more difficult. So, and ads is another thing that lots of people were running in 2020 and have seen to be more difficult in 21 and 22. But it's even more important not only just have a website, but to have a good website, basically, is what you're saying, that's discoverable through SEO and search.
Yeah, I think part of it is kind of from a positive perspective rather than oh my gosh, how are we going to compete with the high street giants? It's that because customers are desperately trying to find these independent and small business products, I think a lot of people are just genuinely trying their best to shop with you. And it's all about giving yourself the best opportunity of being found. And because other small businesses have gotten pretty good at getting found, you also need to be as good as your closest competitor, whether that's probably not Marks and Spencer's, but if it's your best mate in the next city over or someone you met at that Etsy meetup, you need your website to be as good as their website if you want to appear where they appear in search results.
Well, I think this brings us on very nicely to the next topic, because so number one, it's got to be discoverable. Number two, and this is an interesting debate that I know that we've had before, but talking about how you can build it yourself. There are all these platforms out there, but what are some of the things that you think people aren't aware of when they maybe build their own website and it looks lovely and it and it looks really nice, but what else is there that people need to think about when it comes to their websites?
Yeah, so there's a huge, I was going to say, like a scale of knowledge when it comes to building a website. And what I will say is, like, kind of with a caveat, is that a lot of website designers might only know some aspects of these areas I'm going to talk about as well. So I think a lot of small business owners can generally recognize when a website just looks good, when the branding is on point, it looks pretty, it looks professional, it looks cute and cool and trendy. But that is just one aspect of website design. I've already mentioned SEO, search engine optimization, which is all about making sure that your website is formatted in a way that just displays all of your content and explains everything you sell in a way that Google can read and understand really easily, so that it can rank you as often and as highly as possible. SEO tends to be, I tend to find that a lot of small businesses, once they know about like making their website pretty, SEO is often the second thing they need to tackle. Then on the list is UX, which is a really stupid acronym for user experience, which is all about somewhat of the science and psychology behind website design, which is a nice way of saying it's all about manipulating your visitors to try and make sure that you get your desired outcome. So it's basically like if you've got an online shop, designing it to make sure that humans get from wherever they land to your checkout as efficiently as possible. And then a huge one is website accessibility, which is just about removing barriers on your website to make sure that your content and your products are available to everyone, regardless of any disabilities they might have that impact how they use the web. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, just because it's the least known. I like, it's like one of those like unknown unknowns where people don't know it's a thing that they don't know.
Yeah.
Go out on Google. I like to compare it to, you know, like if you go to a cafe on the high street and they've got a step out the front, and a reasonable adjustment would be to include a ramp so that wheelchair users can get access to the shop. There are many small adjustments we can make to our websites that are the equivalent of putting in little ramps that just mean that nobody is exclusive, and we can provide that inclusive, accessible experience that lots of small businesses want to for their customers as well.
Yes, it's such an interesting topic, because I remember hearing Michelle Ovens, who's the founder of Small Business Britain. They have a campaign, I think it's The Entrepreneur, that they have where they highlight entrepreneurs with disabilities. And she mentioned some statistic, and I can't remember the exact statistic now, but it's something like a large proportion of the general population have some form of disability, whether that's to do with their, or some accessibility needs, I should say, really.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at the small business community, so if you're somebody like me who services entrepreneurs, it was something like over a third of people in the entrepreneur community have some kind of accessibility needs, because people with accessibility needs are more likely to be starting their own business because they have that requirement for flexibility. So I thought that was really fascinating.
Yeah.
And it puts, of course, accessibility is something that we should all be doing, like you say, just in the same way that a cafe should be accessible. But it's just the fact that if you're somebody who is in that small business arena, it's almost, you may not realize this, but then maybe a third of the people that you're dealing with have got some kind of accessibility needs.
I think that's really so true, because a lot of time when I talk about accessibility, I think a lot of the people immediately glaze over and think I'm talking about something incredibly technical that affects a really small minority. I think like one of the examples that comes up a lot in accessibility is people who are blind and rely on a screen reader that reads out the content of a website as opposed to seeing your pictures, which is definitely something to take into consideration. That's why we do things like complete our alt text and make sure that we thoroughly describe the physical characteristics of our products in our product descriptions. But there's also things like neurodiversities that impact how you navigate a website, autism and dyslexia. And I'm not going to say I'm an accessibility expert here. These are just kind of conditions to bear in mind, or things to bear in mind when you are DIYing your own website. But they have some serious impacts on how you use the web. Like I'm sure a lot of people who do have dyslexia, or a lot of us who don't, recognize the, like, use Comic Sans, use the yellow paper. And I'm saying that websites should have Comic Sans and yellow backgrounds, but to be honest, websites should have a lower contrast than bright white and pure black, because that makes it way more accessible. And a lot of these things kind of group together to impact on other factors. So for example, Google really likes accessible websites, which is understandable because humans like accessible websites. So in general, the more accessible your website is, the better your SEO is as well. So making your website more accessible is only a really, 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 really ruddy good thing.
I love that. And that's so true, that it's not even something people even know that they haven't thought about.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is, speaking of like just how it impacts people who might not necessarily have a disability that impacts how they use the web, even going through to, as a really, like, I don't know, small example is I wear glasses and I've got a pretty like mild prescription. But if that means I'm using my phone in the evening and I've left my glasses upstairs on my bed, if I'm trying to shop from your website and all of your text is slightly too blurry because you have used a crazy font with a really light color on a light background, it means that you're going to lose me, your non-disabled customer, as well, because you haven't hit a really basic standard that would make your website accessible to everyone, but also just easier for people to use.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about UX then. So how should people even be thinking about this when they're building their website? Is it a question of looking at how people are already using your website and trying to improve that, or are there sort of certain best practices that go around UX?
The first thing that I would think of if you're a small business owner who knows nothing about website design, is knowing that huge businesses have spent hundreds of millions of pounds, like a disgustingly obscene amount of money, on perfecting their UX. So if you're looking at how to lay out an e-commerce homepage, look at the high street giants, because they have spent 5, 10, 100 million pounds to know that the way they've laid out their homepage is a way that attracts customers and sends them off to the right products. What I see a lot of small business owners doing is designing a homepage as if they have never seen a website before. And sometimes also being led by the theme or template that they've got from Shopify, WordPress, or Squarespace as well. So they end up using like these weird features, animation, scrolling carousels, that all of which you wouldn't find on like Glossier, which is a huge brand that has a great e-commerce homepage. Glossier would never use all of these tips and tricks. They don't need them. They know they want big old banners, clear text, and nice big buttons. So yeah, definitely take your lead from high street brands who have spent this obscene amount of money, and also try and actively tell your customers where to go. A lot of small businesses, we sell products that nobody actually needs. That's nothing wrong with that. Like, nobody needs art prints. Nobody needs really good stationery. Nobody needs like a dog harness that's got a strawberry print on it, even though now I want a dog harness with a strawberry print on it. So a lot of the time it's our job to get these customers on our websites to kind of have a want and turn it into a need, and to give them a reason to buy it. But we need to like write those reasons on our websites. Like, if you think that this would be a great gift for dog lovers who also like the outside, or this is a great thing to wear to a festival, you got to just write that on your website. And that comes into UX, because you're just kind of pushing people towards a purchase, this is the kind of topic where I feel really evil when I talk about it. But this again is what the huge companies are doing. So let's take from their learnings and benefit as small businesses too.
The website, it's like the idea of the bucket with you don't want your bucket to have holes in, because you spend time, effort, money sending people, coming up with social media posts or filming reels or whatever else, and then with the ultimate purpose of sending them to your website. So if they get to your website and it's a horrible experience, then that's such a wasted journey. So I would say that this is really about making it as smooth and as enjoyable as possible for your customers when they actually get there.
We just want it so that somebody lands wherever they land on your website, and they get through to the checkout as quickly, as efficiently, as simply as possible. A really nice, or not a really nice example of this, but something that, again, I see quite a lot, is a lot of small businesses, they do tend to have, or a lot of them have like an ethical or charitable message behind them, or a campaign-based message where they are kind of using their products to raise money for charity or to make change in a positive way. A lot of these businesses I see on their websites, which should be kind of optimized as online shops for e-commerce, but then they spend so much time telling the story about all of the good they want to do that they kind of stop optimizing for selling products, which is like, if the products are the vehicle of change, you still need to optimize your website to sell those products.
Yeah.
Lean into e-commerce-iness. Look at these big brands online. If they do big banners followed by 4 products, followed by 2 big banners, maybe try big banner, 4 products, 2 big banners.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a really annoying question.
Yep.
And I'm sure the answer is probably not going to be an answer that you can just give in a short sentence. But let's say somebody's got a website, and an e-commerce website specifically, and they are worried about their conversion rate. And they're like, okay, maybe it was even better than it used to be and now it's dropped, or maybe maybe over time it's steadily getting worse, or whatever it is, or maybe it's never been great. Is there, how complex is it to work out why someone's conversion rate is low, and how easy is it to kind of pinpoint, right, this is what I need to do?
For me, if someone comes to like me, the website expert, and says my conversion rate sucks, then I will normally open their website and I'll be able to tell them within about 5 minutes. But there's generally two reasons. So one is that it's got terrible UX, which basically means that it's not filtering everybody to a product and enter the checkout. One of the more common reasons that gets overlooked is a lack of search engine optimization. The reason why this impacts your conversion rate is that traffic from search engines, traffic from Google, should be the most plentiful and tends to be the highest converting as well. So if you do not have all of this really juicy search engine traffic, you don't have this high converting pool of customers to kind of raise that average overall. So the first thing I do when I look at a website, when someone tells me that they've got a conversion rate that's less than 2%, that's when I start to go, ooh, I'll have a look at that. So the first thing I do is I'll look at their homepage, and if it looks like an e-commerce website, then the next thing I'll do is take a look at their SEO and start running their website through some SEO tools. But I think a lot of small businesses forget that they have an online shop and that other online shops exist. So it seems really daft, but one of the first things to do is like, okay, how different does my website look from my biggest high street competitor? If you sell homewares, look at Oliver Bonus and look at made.com. If you sell beauty products, look at Glossier. If you sell dog products, I mean, look at Pets at Home. That's probably not very sexy, but just look at your big competitors and be like, okay, they've spent millions of pounds to know this is the best way to lay it out. How far away am I from that layout? And if I maybe adopt more of their techniques, it would probably help a lot.
Yeah, that's such a good point as well about the SEO, because and it's one of the things that I say about social media all the time, because people get so, I don't really know why it is. I don't know whether it's because even though it's hard to master social media, it is easy to understand it. Like if you've got a shop, you go, oh, I can start an Instagram account, I can put pictures up, even though we all know that it's much more involved than that. And there's so many things you have to think about. But it's almost like people have this blind spot about SEO and about traffic. Or maybe, as you say, is it because it's just not some...
It's not sexy. It's not glamorous. I think it's also... So in my SEO workshop that I ran on a couple of weeks ago online, I was amazed by, like, I don't know, the turnout and the popularity of it, because I thought it's a really dry topic not many people are interested in. But one of the things I find is if you do run something like Squarespace or Shopify, a lot of the time you might have like a page setting or an image setting and a little tiny word that says SEO, and it lets you fill out a description here or a page title there. And it gives the impression that once you've completed that description or that title, that you've kind of checked that SEO box. Whereas that is, say there's the 100 things you can do to improve your SEO. That's job number 92. There are so many other things before that that are so much bigger and so much more impactful that it's just really worth sitting down and learning about SEO and seeking out specifically small business SEO advice. Because one thing I find as someone who is an SEO expert is that a lot of the advice available when I search for an SEO question are aimed at SEO experts. They're aimed at someone who already has nailed all of the basics, who already understands that they've completed all of this other information and they've written really rich content and that they've got all of their backlinks sorted. But yeah, like actually seek out resources for people who don't know anything about SEO. And there's no shame in not knowing anything about SEO. No one teaches it. It's not a thing you learn about at school. In fact, the only places I've ever seen SEO being taught has been some interesting dated knowledge being shared. It's a lot of finding people you trust, and you can find those people on social media and read all of their blogs on SEO and just absorb knowledge, become an SEO sponge.
Well, at least now they know where you are, Amy, of course, as well. They can come and
my wonderful blog, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I wanted to ask you another question. It's kind of not really that related to websites, actually, but I just thought I'd throw this in here as a bit of like a wild card, because one of the reasons that I found out about you, or I followed you for ages actually on Instagram, and one of the things I really like about your Instagram content is it's actually really, really useful, and it is really good at explaining things, and you do get good engagement, you do get good interaction, and I don't know, I just think you do a really, really good job of sharing, not just interesting and useful, but kind of also quite unique as well. So sometimes you share things that I've not seen talked about in other places. So do you have a process that you go through of working out what to say on social media? Or do you literally like, I feel really strongly about this, I'm going to do a topic on it?
Sometimes when I go on, like, I think my team call them Aime rants, when something irks me, and I will spend a few hours explaining to my Instagram followership as to why something is terrible and why we should try and change it. Part of it is literally like, just from a strategic point of view for my small business, I just started by asking myself the question at the time, why would someone follow a marketing agency on Studio Cotton? Why would someone of my audience want to follow a marketing agency? Or then why would someone want to find a website design studio when we focused only on websites? Because like, why would you? Like, I don't want to be sold services, and my customers wouldn't either. The other thing I'm looking at is so much when we talk about social media marketing is always about growing a community or nurturing a community. The big thing about community is that if you want to take something out of it, which I do, I want to take the leads out of it, I want to take awareness out of it, is that you have to put something in. So the thing that I put in is helpful content, quick guides. And the thing that I hopefully take out of it is, again, lots of praise and inquiries. But yeah, I think just over time, like I've found that the weirder I am, the more I like put effort into calling people silly sausages, the more it helps my engagement. But a lot of it is like a lot of people talk about tone of voice and how they really like my tone of voice. And I'm like, oh, like that's just how I talk. And I mean, I do have thesaurus.com open for when I run out of fruits and foods to call people. But yeah, it really helps to just be weird and silly. And like if something does irk you, like most of the time I'll speak to someone in real life and be like, hey, this feels wrong. Does it feel wrong to you too? And they'll be like, yeah. And then I'll go on a rant and share my Instagram stories about people trying to scam me with fake SEO products or people exploiting illustrators to get free product design. So yeah, I'm gonna share that stuff. I like defending small businesses and creatives and complaining about it on Instagram.
Amazing. And I think that's such a good point you made there about just being yourself, and like it, and your guides, like they are genuinely useful. Like you did that whole one recently about how Google works out how blogging helps you connect with different bloggers, and how if you connect with like the wrong ones, or it ends up on the wrong websites, you know, how it impacts your ranking. And actually it's genuinely useful. It's like when I read your guides, I'm like, oh right, okay, even if I've heard this sort of type of thing before, it just sometimes really helps illustrate it. But I also think as well, that's what a lot of people miss with social media in general, is that they're thinking about like, what can I say? But you're obviously really honing in on what's useful and sharing it in your tone of voice.
Yeah, I like being daft, and I do think that's something that probably doesn't get not like appreciated as much. But like I use analogies all the time, and it's because that's how my brain works. I've realized now that not everyone's the same, or not everyone's brain is doing what I'm doing, where I'm telling stories and making silly analogies. Like not a silly one, but like my wheelchair ramp, I use that analogy all the darn time. I spent ages working these things out and putting together diagrams, because the ways that my brain kind of takes the information and stores it. And I feel like if that helped me to understand something, hopefully it'll help other people too. And also try and cover more of the basics, particularly with SEO and UX and accessibility, with everything. A lot of small businesses might understand, if they do know about these factors, that they might understand that they need to do accessibility, or they need to do UX or do SEO, but they don't know why. And if you don't know why, then a lot of time you can end up on a box checking exercise, which can be way more time consuming, because you spend ages filling out titles and descriptions, but you miss this huge chunk of like, actually what Google's trying to do is understand what this page is about. So instead of filling out this title, what I'm going to do is just write more words on this page to explain what my product is and how to buy it.
Yeah, that's so true. And I completely agree with you. I often spend a lot of time explaining the why behind things, because people are just much more likely to do something if they understand why they're being asked to do it. Whereas if you just say you need to do this and don't explain why, then people are like, oh, well, I'll just stick that on the bottom of my massive to-do list.
Yeah. And when it's and it's something that should be at the top. Oh, I could talk about SEO all darn day, but like, get on it. Small businesses, get on your SEO. It'll be great. It'll work out.
And if they don't know where to start, they want to find out more, Aime, where can they find you?
What a smooth transition. So you can follow Studio Cotton on Instagram via @studio.cotton. That's the period cotton. Or our website is studiocotton.co.uk. We have a blog at studiocotton.co.uk/blog, which we post one or two articles. No, one or two. I was going to say one or two a month, but maybe 3 a month on a good month. Lots of heaps of free website advice, little SEO bits. And roughly once a week on a Thursday, I also do a Q&A on Instagram where you can send in questions about some sort of small business topic. And I usually answer them all, because, again, I love attention and praise. So feel free to send me questions so that you can hopefully praise me for my helpful answer.
Thank you so much for listening in, and thank you so much for Aime for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have a moment to rate or review the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me. You can rate it either in the Spotify app or on iTunes, and you can leave a review on iTunes as well. Why not head over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club, say hi, let me know what you took away from today's episode, share any thoughts that you might have had about your own website. And of course, I do love to see it where you're listening to the podcast. I really enjoy when people send me photos of them tuning in. And of course, if you subscribe or follow the podcast, then you'll be the first to know about each new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.